Everybody should mute themselves for a while.
Yeah, everyone muting themselves would be great. My name is Ian Thomas Tafoya, for those who know me and those who don't. I'm a co-chair of the Zoning and Planning Committee of INC with Christine O'Connor, whom you've just been hearing from as well. We're really happy to have everyone here. Although I was thinking today as I was coming down to Capitol Hill how I miss having coffee with everyone. We are excited. We have a good program today about Metro Districts and Representative Jim Gibson from Coloradans from Metro District Reform. Then I'm just going to give you a quick update about the inclusionary housing ordinance that the delegates of INC chose to support. And then we're going to do around the city because we think it's really important. Sometimes it's easy to get lost in everything that the city's doing and their processes and their timelines. And it's great to hear and see how we can support and learn from each other. INC does have an anti-discrimination policy, and we've made efforts to improve our dialogue. And so we just want to say that we do reserve the right to remove people for defamatory or attacking language that doesn't meet the standards of our policy. And I'm just really excited to have everyone here. It's always so great to see everyone turn out every month. It makes me feel like it's worth something when Christine and I are planning. So Jim Gibson is a person that I've known for a few years now. I live in Bear Valley, which is not far from Harvey Park. And Jim has been involved in advocating for his community. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, Jim, but in your advocacy for your own community, you learned how to fight a system that's affecting a lot of communities. And I know that that's a lot of how my organizing has been around environmental justice issues, where you learn from your fight. So with that, Jim, I think you have been making the rounds. I know the Colorado Latino Forum has had you on. I know that Brother Jeff has had you on a couple of times to talk about this. And your organization has a good website, explains a lot of the stuff. So we're happy to have you here. We do want to note that Christine and I were requested to bring this in. I think that there's a lot of community dialogue around this right now. And so we wanted to use our opportunity to educate y'all.
Okay, as Ian said, I'm from Harvey Park. I actually came into this issue, I guess, somewhat by accident. I was involved in the redevelopment of the Loretto Heights campus, providing community input to both a community-based as well as a city-based process. And then shortly after that, the city planning process was over. The developer of the site was, I guess, about a week after that, was before a city council committee proposing something that I've only heard peripherally on and really didn't know much about, was proposing a metro district for the redevelopment of the Loretto Heights campus. Basically, just to very briefly, I have a PowerPoint here, but I just want to cover a couple of points first. Let me share my screen so I can get my PowerPoint up here. Where is that power? Today is the 27th, right? Developers use this this thing called a metro district when there's what we call a dirt district. There's nothing there. There's no residents. There's no infrastructure. There's no homes, of course, and they basically use this instrument as a financing tool to build infrastructure within the boundaries of the metro district. I'm going to share my screen now. Let's see. For some reason I'm having, let's see. Sorry about here we go. Okay. You should all be seeing my screen. Is everybody seeing the PowerPoint now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay. And these metro districts, they have a board. It's a government. Sometimes you'll hear referred to it as a quasi-government. It really isn't quasi. It's its own government. And it has a board that basically performs the functions of a mayor and a city council. And frankly, the more research I've conducted on these over now it's almost 2 years, the more troubling it's become. Serious implications for affordable housing, gentrification, and the surrounding neighborhoods. We've also seen that there's a number of abuses that have been going on with these metro districts. One of them that I would consider to be an abuse is that sometimes a metro district will be created, and then the owner of the property will come to the local municipality and say, well, I have this metro district, and because I have this metro district, I need some rezoning. And to me, that's kind of backwards, but sometimes that actually helps them make the case for a rezoning. And I'm just going to go over a few of the topics that we're going to cover here. These are my words. I'm going to get into what the intended and unintended purposes of a metro district are. They've evolved over time. Why metro districts? Well, frankly, from the developer's point of view, why not? And we'll get into the details on that. Democracy. I think you'll see once we get into more of this, that there's really, this is a principle that the country was founded on. There's taxation without representation in these metro districts. And the metro district residents are the ones who have to pay the price, but there's also risk to surrounding neighborhoods around the metro district itself. And then we have some solutions. As Ian said, I'm part of a group now called Coloradans for Metro District Reform, and a metro district is a creature of state government. So we're trying to, part of the issue we're addressing at the state level, because there has been some loopholes in the statute and there's been some manipulation of the statute that we'd like to curb. And we're hoping that a bill will be introduced later, I guess it's actually next week. So we'll have more news for you very, very shortly, okay? All right, let's look at the kind of the intended purpose, and these are my words, okay? These are new governments, they're full-fledged governments, and the idea is that it's a financing mechanism so that the people who live within the district can be charged higher property taxes to pay for the infrastructure within the district. Infrastructure meaning like sewers, roads, all that kind of stuff, okay? So that, I think, was the original intention of the legislature in creating these, is that if there's some place that is totally unimproved, there's no residents, there's no infrastructure, obviously no homes, how do you get something started? So they gave this tool to local governments who have a role to play in it. And the local government actually decides whether to allow an election to take place so that a metro district can be created. So the state wanted to give that tool to local governments so they would have it in their toolbox, okay? But there's also an unintended purpose here. And this was not, in my view, what the legislature had in mind. It's turned into a financial tool right now that basically increases the profitability of especially residential developments. And the one way that it does that is I guess you could say, prior to the way infrastructure was done here in Colorado, prior to the increased usage of metro districts, there would be, one of two ways that developers would usually, or the city would try to put an infrastructure in place on an unimproved lot. One would be that the city would just build infrastructure, even though, again, there's no homes there. And then over time, developers would, buy the land, et cetera, build homes there, and then use that infrastructure that had been financed and built by the city. As cities became more and more strapped, especially with the introduction of Tabor, it kind of shifted, at least for a little while, to that the developer would take the responsibility for that. The developer would either get a loan from a bank and use that loan to build infrastructure on this unimproved lot that they had, and then they would build homes, and then when they would sell the home, they would build the cost of that infrastructure into the sale price of the home. Okay, and then and that would be the end of it. Okay, but now there's this new tool. I say new; it's been really its use has been rapidly growing now for the last couple of decades, called a metro district, which allows the developer basically to take away the risk of the infrastructure financing that they used to incur on their own when they had to get a bank loan or they had to use their own money to build infrastructure on an unimproved lot, and it shifts that risk, if things don't work out with the project, to the future metro district residents. Okay, So that in itself is improving profitability, because as anyone will tell you, anytime you're making an investment, you always want to try to minimize the risk that goes on with that investment. Okay. So why metro districts? Maybe the better question to ask is why not, especially from the developer's point of view. Let me just walk you through the process of how this happens. And this happened in the case of Loretta Heights and the Denver City Council. Cities and counties approve dirt, what we call dirt. Again, there's nothing there, no infrastructure, no homes, nothing. They approve these dirt metro districts, okay? The state authorizes the cities and counties to approve them. And then they will, that basically, if the city council or the county commissioners approve that, what we call what is called a service plan, that's kind of an application to create a metro district, an election is then conducted, okay? That basically, that vote of city council or the county commissioners authorizes an election. So the people who are living in the boundaries that have been set for the metro district get to vote on whether they want to actually have a formal metro district, okay? Well, in the case of a dirt district, the only voters there are related to the developers. So we can take Loretta Heights as an example of this. No one is living there right now. I'm sorry? No one is living there right now. There's no real residents. The only property owners there are affiliated with the developer, okay? So they have this election, and then they have an election that says, should we create a metro district or not? And of course, the developer went through all the trouble of filing that service plan with, in our case, Denver City Council. So they vote yes. It's usually a vote like 5-0. Yes, a metro district will be created on this site now, okay? At that same election, they also pass a bunch of initiatives. Again, usually it's just about 5 people affiliated with the developers. Often among those initiatives is that, as we all know, Tabor gives the right to citizens to vote on future tax increases and future debt. Well, in that election, again, before any residents start living on the metro district, that right is taken away from those future metro district residents. That's typically included in that same election. And this is no small phenomenon across the state. There's over 1 million people right now, according to the Department of Local Affairs at the state level, who live in metro districts, about 1/5 of the population. So there's a lot of people in the state who are being affected by this. Virtually all new growth, especially when it's unimproved lots, dirt districts, involves a metro district along the Front Range. Okay. Well, as I got in deeper and deeper into this issue, there was another troubling aspect that I found districts. This is an illustration of a metro district up in Loveland, Colorado. And you'll see it's one residential development here, okay? But it actually has 4 different metro districts to it, okay? And they're simply called 1, 2, 3, and 4, okay? Well, this one is a very, very small parcel of land, okay? In the case of Loretta Heights, this parcel of land is 66 by 66 feet, and there's no structure on it at all, okay? And then you'll have these larger districts, 2, 3, and 4 in the case of Lee Farm, where real residents live or are going to live, okay? And again, what happens here then is before any real residents move into districts 2, 3, and 4, there is an intergovernmental agreement that's executed between District 1 and District 2, between District 1 and District 3, between District 1 and District 4, an intergovernmental agreement. Again, there's no residents living here yet, that basically makes the District 1 what we call a master district, okay? So that district, which is, again, in the case of Colorado Heights, is only 66 by 66 feet, and no one lives there really. It's just the only people who live in that district are developer affiliated people. They're the only ones that have a deed to a property. Basically, after that intergovernmental agreement is signed, District 1 can tell District 2, oh, you're going to have to increase your taxes because you need to issue these many more bonds. And it obviously can say the same thing to District 3 and District 4. So we have cases where a development may have started in, the late 90s, and to this day, this District 1 is still just the only people on that district board can be the electors, which has to be a property owner, and the only property owners are developer affiliated people. And the developer basically dictates to these folks what kind of debt they're going to be in, as well as what kind of property taxes that they're going to have to pay. Okay. So that to me was another troubling aspect. This is where I really see the notion of taxation without representation, because while these people who live here are eligible to serve on this board, even if they get on the board, they have to follow the orders of this board, which again is made up of people affiliated with the developer. Okay. Why metro districts? Again, why not? The district itself now has become a significant source of developer profits. So this is a government, all right, that has been created that is increasing developer profitability for residential developments. Okay, it's become another profit center for developers. So you have in the traditional way that residential developers have made money is they buy land, so that's part of their cost. Then they build homes, so that's part of their cost, and then they sell that home, and presumably there's a profit when they sell it over the cost that they've accumulated over those years. But now the district itself contributes to the developer's profits aside from just building and selling homes. Okay, and again, as I said earlier, if the project were to go south, thankfully we haven't had that happening much lately because the real estate industry in Colorado has been so robust. But if the project were to go south, the developer is fine on that infrastructure financing. The developer didn't take out the loan. The loan is not a liability of the developer. It's a liability of the future Metro District residents. They're the ones who are taking the risk now for that infrastructure financing. Okay. So if God forbid, if the real estate industry did take a big dip and we had something like what happened in the Great Recession of 2008, and home prices went down, and then some of these projects might be experiencing financial trouble, then it would be the district residents' pocketbooks which would be on the line. Okay. And this is where we get into the whole notion of taxation without representation. In many cases, the same developer executives who sit on these, what we call master district boards, they in effect control the taxes and governmental operations of many metro district boards across the state. So you could have the same developer executive out at a development by the airport. In fact, this is true. The same developer executive who is now on the board of the Loretto Heights Metro District Board is also on the same, is on a different Metro District Board for a development out by the airport. And they of course don't live really in any of these communities. They just have a deed to a small parcel of land in that master district, which governs those other residential districts. For example, the new owner of the Park Hill Golf Course is Westside Investment Partners, as a lot of folks on this call know, is that they're trying to redevelop that golf course right now. And Mike, the question that I'm going to ask, because that developer typically does use a metro district for what we call a dirt district, where you're going to have to build infrastructure on it if it's redeveloped. That's going to be in the property's future. So this is what I had shared with some folks in the Park Hill neighborhood, is to keep their eye out for the potential proposal of a metro district. And as of December 2020, this is according to data that's at the Department of Local Affairs at the state level, the executives with that developer occupy this many metro district board seats across the state. So, and when I'm counting seats, for example, I'm saying that my councilman is Councilman Kevin Flynn. He occupies one seat. Well, in the case of Andrew Klein, who's an executive at Westside, he occupies 36 metro district seats across the state. Most of their work is actually in the metro area. And these other folks are also executives with Westside. So these developer executives get these seats, if you will, and they govern and they determine the taxing and bonding of these metro district districts that they govern, okay? So the developer-controlled metro district boards, and some of you may have read, it was a series that was done in 2019 and 2020 in the Denver Post by McGoy. A lot of this information is from that series. They drowned residents into debt for decades, okay? In fact, a quote from that one of the articles in that series in December of 2019, this is someone who's actually in the industry, is a bond attorney to help metro districts issue those bonds. And you can see she was quoted as saying there's so much debt outstanding, they meaning the residents won't ever see it go down. Obviously, these increased property taxes to pay back that debt increase the cost of housing. And we've seen in some cases where property taxes have gone up 5 times just in a period of 2 years. And this higher cost of housing because of the higher property taxes is obviously putting upward
Hey,
pressure.
Vicky, it's the taxation thing is really good.
If you could please mute.
I'm sorry.
You know how they use taxation districts for developers to fund stuff?
Steve, can you please mute yourself? You're talking to all of us.
I'm telling you.
I'm
just
trying to
telling
find,
you.
I'll do it. Never mind. I did it. Okay, sorry.
That's okay. So this increased cost of housing, okay, puts up obviously upward price pressure on the cost of housing in the metro district, which can have kind of like a ripple effect on the surrounding communities. So we've seen in some cases where the increased cost of housing within a metro district promotes gentrification in the surrounding neighborhood. So it becomes an issue, obviously, forcing people out of their neighborhoods because they can't afford the higher property taxes that come along with those higher property values, or you know, they can't afford the higher rent that the landlord has to pay those higher property taxes. Okay, so here's a case where this is actually a case, kind of an analysis from the Loretto Heights district. This is just a hypothetical case. Let's assume we have a $500,000 home. That's how much it's worth, and we have the property taxes for that home in a non-metro district home, just a regular house in the city and county of Denver, how much property tax they pay. And then then all of this column is the Loretto Heights metro district. And this is what the developer, this was the service plan that was approved by the city council. This is what the developer can charge for property taxes once residents start moving in there. So you'll see that this is the Denver Public Schools, and you'll see that both a non-metro district home as well as a metro home, they pay the same amount of taxes for a $500,000 home for the school district. And they pay the same amount of taxes to the city and the drainage district as well. But the folks in the metro district, they have to pay those taxes plus these. So based on what the developer is authorized to raise taxes in the Loretto Heights metro district, they can charge up to almost $1,800 a year to pay back bonds that the developer is authorized to issue. Pay another $535 for operations and maintenance of the infrastructure within the metro district, and then they also pay what is called a regional levy, which goes to the city. The way a regional levy works is that basically the city taxes that on to a metropolitan district at the application and condition of creating the district, because let's just say in the case of, this is all again hypothetical because there are no residents yet living on Loretto Heights, but let's just say that once the development kicks in, people start living there as well as visiting the site, well, some roads outside of the metro district have to be widened. And this money would be sent to the city, and that money would be used to widen those roads or maybe improve sewer lines, those sorts of things. So the people within the metro district, the residents within that metro district, eventually they're going to be residents there. They're going to pay for infrastructure outside of the boundaries of their own metro district. Okay, that $178 that they can be charged up to. Okay, so here's some of the fallout that comes from it. There's very little, if any, democratic accountability to the community, to the actual Metro District residents who are living there. They don't have any say, really. All these arrangements were set up before they even set foot on the property or considered buying a home there. So again, the fact that they don't have any taper rights to vote on future debt or future tax increases, that has all of that had been settled before they even found out about the possibility of buying that home, because again, only the developers people vote. And once people buy that home, they're basically locked in, right? I hate to admit this, but when I bought my home, between you and me, thankfully, I'm not in a Metro District, but I did not read all the fine print when I signed that stack of paper at closing. There is a disclosure reform in there within, at closing that will tell you you're in a Metro District and you may pay more in taxes, but I think a lot of people sign that without even reading it, let alone understand it. So even after they're there, they're voiceless and they're often even unaware. Again, there's that stack of paper at closing that I have to admit I was overwhelmed by. Initially their property taxes can be low, and so maybe even if they see the property taxes, maybe the house hasn't been built yet. They're getting it customized, built, whatever. And so I can handle this property tax on a yearly basis, and then in 2 years it goes up 5 times in some cases. They don't understand that they're in a Metro District, let alone that there's a Metro District board. Okay, so a lot of folks who don't live in a Metro District have a hard time understanding their property tax bill. The property tax bill for people who within Metro Districts is even more confusing. So after they bought the home and lived there, they continue to be left in the dark. They do have elections, okay? Again, because a lot of people aren't aware, they live in the Metro District, don't realize that they're eligible to run for a Metro District board seat. Frequently, those elections are canceled. We've seen cases, this actually happened up in Green Valley Ranch, when as residents became aware that they were living in a Metro District, some of them wanted to run for a Metro District board so they could have some say over their future debt and future tax increases. And what happened there in that case with Green Valley Ranch, the developer there is Oakwood Homes. Patrick Hamill is the CEO and owner of Oakwood Homes. His firm went out and found a resident who was more friendly to the developer's agenda, in my mind, rather than the resident's agenda, supported that candidate with about 2 candidates actually with a nearly $40,000. All this was documented in the Denver Post investigative series. And they gave money to the residents who were much more friendly to the developer. So many Metro District residents feel like there's no recourse for them. This is where we just don't have much democratic accountability. Maybe they look at their property tax statement the first time and say, my goodness, I didn't realize I was going to be paying this much in taxes. And their instinct is to call their local city council person. The city council person with some justification says, well, I really don't have any jurisdiction. I may have voted to create that Metro District, but I really don't have any jurisdiction as we sit here today to do anything about those additional property taxes. You'll have to contact your local Metro District board officials. Often, again, they don't have much recourse because the Metro District officials are affiliated with the developer who may not care about their grievances. Often there's very little, almost always little transparency, very little oversight, although it could be conducted by the municipalities who authorized that election to create the Metro District. Typically, municipalities, including the city and county Denver, don't really spend much time or money on oversight of those districts. So there's no resident control over future debt and taxes. Residents are in the dark about how the debt is actually being spent. They'll ask questions as well. Did that go for the pool? Did this bond issue go for the widened road within the Metro District? And they have a hard time getting answers. And we've seen some cases where sometimes there's been instances of what looks to be vendor overpayment. There has been this kind of cottage industry that's developed around Metro Districts. We have bond attorneys right now who specialize in creating and helping manage these districts. We have accountants that specialize in this. district management companies that contract with the developer to run the district. And again, these relationships sometimes get overly cozy, and it's the Metro District's residents' money that's being used to pay these bills, not their own money. So sometimes those cozy relationships can result in vendor overpayment. And this is my term. In a developer-controlled Metro District, it's really like a private government, and it has all the powers of other municipal governments. Again, we've already seen they can indebt and tax district residents. They can condemn private property if they wish, and they can move tax money from, say, District 2 to District 3. So the people in District 2 are paying for infrastructure in District 3. So they have all kinds of freedom about how they can assess those taxes as well as spend the proceeds of those taxes. So this is an unaccountable government that has quite a bit of power. Now this is a Google map. Okay, these perforated lines is basically the boundaries of the Loretto Heights campus. Okay, this is, for frame of reference, this is South Federal Boulevard, and this is Hamden right here. Okay, and then the point of this slide is that there are going to be pretty considerably higher property taxes within this Metro District. Okay, and the fear is that that upward price pressure could have some ripple effects outside of the Metro District. Okay, we have a neighborhood over here called Dartmouth Heights. There's a neighborhood called Sharon Park, which is, Dartmouth Heights is like $500,000 to $600,000 homes. Sharon Park is more affordable housing, as well as to the east of the campus is College View. There's a real potential for some gentrification, especially in College View and Sharon Park, where at least by Denver standards, these homes are fairly affordable. That could put some price pressure on those surrounding neighborhoods and maybe even beyond, which leads again to potential gentrification and possibly forcing some residents out of their homes. The other effect that this has is that if there is gentrification, you obviously have higher property taxes going on within the Metro District, and then you may have higher property taxes that go on surrounding the Metro District. So what that does that has a different kind of ripple effect. That means that when, I skipped over a slide there. That means that when, let's say that for Denver Public Schools needs more money to build new schools, or they just need more money for operations, the people both within the Metro District and potentially the people outside the Metro District have a less appetite to approve that tax increase, because they feel, geez, I'm paying too much in property taxes as it is. I'm going to turn down that proposed school tax increase, for example, or that proposed city tax increase, maybe for a bond issue. Okay, so they have less tax appetite for other public purposes. So that's one way that non-Metro District residents in the surrounding neighborhoods might have to pay the price. Here's another scenario. Thankfully has not happened yet, but this was an idea that was floated down in Colorado Springs. And this is, again, let's keep our fingers crossed that we don't face this eventuality, but if the real estate market was to crash, and that meant property values went down, then it could put a Metro District in trouble, okay, financial trouble, where it's issued bonds and it doesn't have enough taxes to pay back those bonds, okay? You'll see, just as a side note here, this little number one, this is the Loretto Heights campus right here. That little number one is that 66 by 66 feet master district, okay? So what could happen in this kind of, terrible case scenario would be is that this because the real estate market plunges, this Metro District gets into financial trouble. It goes back to City Council and say, we can't pay our bonds. City Council says, well, we don't want to take on these bonds. Figure out a way to solve the problem. Well, this again was an idea that was floated in Colorado Springs. Hopefully, I don't think it was actually acted upon, but this is a risk that surrounding neighborhoods face that they didn't face before. This district could go back to the City Council and say, we want to change the boundaries of our Metro District, which is this blue line right now. And we now want to include the Dartmouth Heights neighborhood to be part of this new Metro District. And City Council may say, well, we don't want to take the liability for your bonds, So we'll authorize that election, have the election, and then this is a neighborhood that only has about 72 households. So if there's a proposal on the Metro District ballot to expand the boundaries to include this neighborhood, these people could easily outvote these people and pull them into the Metro District, because these folks have every incentive to pull them in, because they're not able to pay their property taxes back, their bond issues that have been issued back. And these folks may all say no, but they have no choice but to join the Metro District. So let's hope none of that happens. But we need to at least know that this is a risk that surrounding neighborhoods face now, in case the real estate market ever goes bust. Okay. So this group that I'm involved with has some solutions, and they're pretty straightforward. And this is what we're asking the state legislature to do, and we're also asking local governments to help with. One is that let's reform the legislation so that only real residents serve on their district boards and not people affiliated with the developer. Interestingly enough, if a Metro District resident is upset with their Metro District board, right now, Metro District residents do not have the right to file a citizen initiative to put on their Metro District election ballot. They don't have that right, so we're proposing that they should have that right, like every other Coloradan has for both state government and their local governments. And again, in that initial election, when only the developers people voted, they took away the rights of future Metro Districts to vote, Metro District residents to vote on both tax increases and new bond debt. We would like those to be reinstated. And then we're asking the legislature, these are all at the state level right now, to take a step back and look at this and say, are these Metro Districts really necessary? And if you do think they're necessary, is it truly the most cost-effective and democratically accountable way to finance infrastructure? And we're also asking, with the notion that if you're in a hole and these Metro Districts have accumulated quite a bit of total debt right now, until these state reforms are in place and we can get our hands around this problem, we're asking local governments not to create any new Metro Districts. We have a bill this session. I think it's going to be introduced this upcoming week from Representative Weissman of Aurora. It's a down payment on what he acknowledges was going to take multi-years to reform this. It took us about 20 to 30 years to get into this problem, and it's many layers, and it's going to take us, I hope not the same amount of time, but those kind of problems are not going to be solved just in 1 year or one legislative session. And that would be something I'd like Inc. to consider whether they'd like to endorse the bill that will be filed later this week. So that's my spiel on Metro Districts and how they've been abused and how they need to be reformed. And I'm wide open to any questions that some people may like to ask.
Okay, I don't see any yet in the chat, and I don't see any hands raised. So I'm going to ask one while people start typing or raising their hand. I'm on the liability. When the city approves a service plan and approves, say, 1.2 billion in bonding capability, I thought I heard you say the city doesn't want to take liability. They don't have any liability, do they? I don't understand the city's liability in any of this.
They do not. They don't have any formal financial liability. The Metro District is on its own, okay? So city council can approve, again, a service plan, which is basically an application for a Metro District. City council can put all kinds of conditions in that service plan. In the case of Loretta Heights, city council did not add any conditions. The developer put together the service plan, and the city council didn't make any amendments or put any conditions in terms of accountability in that plan. And now, but you're right, Christine, they do not, the city is not on the financial hook to pay any bills, or, you know, if the Metro District were to go south, the city is not formally on the hook. My concern is that they may be politically on the hook if there's, you know, all these people still live within the city. They still vote for their local city councilman and the mayor. And there may be a lot of political pressure that says, hey, this Metro District got in trouble and this road hasn't been finished yet, and they're going to demand that the city finish the road.
Okay, now we have a bunch of questions. You ready? The first
go
one is
for it.
how many metro districts are in the city of Denver? Where are they? And
They are all over. Is that something I can get to Christine? I don't have that
Yeah.
right in front of me. I can get you the list of the metro districts in Denver. And
I
Hi,
have
this
a
is
horror
this is
story.
this is Ian. In the invite for this meeting, actually, we included the link to the Denver Metro District website.
Okay. All right, the next one from Nola. Have you ever seen special districts used for protection or stability in neighborhoods, or used to promote equitable development, i.e. Tax harmful development or uses only? Nola, did you want to explain that a little bit more?
no, I think you're muted. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, if you can define what is taxed, right? Could you put certain put the taxes only if you're, like, say, a neighborhood that's facing a lot of change and you want to have equitable development requirements, or you want to prevent ongoing, like, say, harmful to the environment type of uses, or those types of things that are harmful to health from coming in further? Is there a way to have a district that would just tax those types of developments and actually be more of a protective district than
Oh, I see.
than taxing like your average homeowner?
I see what you're saying. Yeah, that can be done. That, to my knowledge, especially in the city and county of Denver, it hasn't been done. What happens is that as proposed metro districts come to city council has not put any conditions on how. City council has complete power to do this, but they haven't put any conditions on how that metro district should conduct itself should the metro district itself be created. So all of that could be done once that the city council authorizes the election, especially in the case of a dirt district where the only people who, if you will, own property in that district are affiliated with the developer. Once that election is approved, the metro district is relatively autonomous from city council. But city council could prevent that if they put conditions in the service plan to hold the governing power of that metro district board accountable to the city and county of Denver. But typically they haven't done that.
Yeah.
Did that answer your question, Nola?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, it's unlikely that they would be motivated to, but here's a question from Larry Ambrose. Are there instances where developers have purchased the bonds issued by the districts upon which boards they sit?
That is a very, very good question. Let me tell you. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I just want to make sure. I think he means the people, those 5 founders that
Yes.
purchased the bonds, their own district is, okay.
Okay, here, let me walk you through this because I've been trying to find ways of simplifying this explanation. It's a little convoluted. And if there's questions about it, please ask. So in the case of when a developer is in control of a metro district, that metro district board, they're controlling the metro district board, okay? They have the capability based on what was granted to them by the approving authority. In our case, it would be Denver City Council. They have the ability to issue bonds, okay? As part of that ability to issue bonds, they can issue what they are called senior bonds and junior bonds, okay? A senior bond means that if the metro district was to get in trouble, those bonds would be paid off first. A junior bond, they would be farther back in line, okay? So the people who are holding the junior bonds could be left holding the bag if the senior bondholders get all paid off, okay? Well, because the junior bondholders are taking on more risk, those bonds have a higher interest rate on them. We've seen municipal bonds that have junior bonds that have 7-8% rates of interest, pretty good interest rate these days. I can't find an instrument that'll give me that much interest, okay? So the developer controlled Metro District Board issues those high interest bonds. And we've seen over and over again where the developer company itself buys those bonds, okay, and sits on those bonds and earns a pretty nice, fairly riskless high interest rate on. So here you have a case where the developer, by controlling the Metro District Board, issued the bond, and then they turn around and they buy the bond. So this is another example of additional profitability for the developer. If that wasn't clear, I totally understand, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions because it's a little convoluted.
Well, we have about 5 more questions.
Okay.
I think I see it's a double whammy for them. So could you go back to the Lee Farm slide and also explain further, and I think this would be important for people who live near Fox Island, Metro District, and other areas as well. How are adjoining neighbors affected by such a Metro District?
No, go back to the slide before the map, please.
The slide before the map?
Slide before the map.
This one?
Yeah, I'm doing screenshots of these and I didn't get this quick enough. Thank you.
Sure.
Now, my question was, when you were explaining impacts on adjoining properties, I wasn't really clear as to how adjoining property owners are impacted by the Metro District.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. In this case, again, this is the perforated line here is the Loretto Heights campus, which is being redeveloped. And then these are the surrounding neighborhoods to the campus, okay? College View is across Federal Boulevard. Sharon Park is right to the north. Dartmouth Heights is over here. The concern and what we've seen with past Metro districts is that because these are higher, they tend to be higher cost homes, in part because of the higher property taxes that these folks are being charged. That puts upward price pressure on the surrounding neighborhoods. So this could result in gentrification of some of the neighborhoods that are surrounding that Metro district. So with that those homes being priced higher, that could result in higher property taxes as well as higher rents, because landlords typically will pass on those higher property taxes to their tenants. So that's one way that people outside the district can be impacted. The other way is that this scenario, which hopefully never happens, but it is a risk, is that if this district, this is again a hypothetical case, if this district were to get in trouble and it can't pay back its bonds, and they say, what are we going to do? They come to the city and they say, hey, we can't pay back these bonds. The city, frankly, doesn't want to have anything to do with it. They don't want to take on this financial liability. They can have another election, another Metro District election, authorized by City Council, that now doesn't just include the campus itself in this hypothetical case, Loretto Heights, includes this neighborhood as well, okay? So they create a new Metro District and the boundaries are now this, okay? The blue plus this perforated neighborhood, the boundaries on the perforated neighborhood. And they basically have an election that says, are we gonna change our boundaries? There's only 7, in this hypothetical case, there's only 72 households here. And these people have every incentive to say, sure, we want to pull these people in. This is going to help us pay our bills. Okay. It's going to help us pay back those bonds. These people could, all 72 households could vote no, and they're still going to be sucked in the Metro District and they're going to be stuck with those future debt.
Okay. I think I got that, but in terms of the first thing you said, the effect of gentrification of surrounding neighborhoods is primarily because of the increased taxation that has to go on within the Metro District, spilling out and affecting property values?
That's right. And we're not talking about a potentially small increase. It could be easily, double the property taxes that are regular, in this case, Denver resident pays. So these taxes that are paid within this
that happened up in Maui.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Well, no, Cindy's not. I just muted her. Go ahead.
Okay, so ask your question again, Christine.
No, I was just trying to clarify the effect on gentrification that you mentioned, which I think has to be thought about in terms of Fox Island and Loretto
Oh.
Heights and any potential one up in Park Hill. The effect on surrounding neighborhoods is based on what people have to pay to live in the Metro District
In the Metro District.
and the
itself.
values of the property in there. Is that correct?
That's
I
right.
may be missing because you mentioned gentrification on surrounding neighborhoods, and I want to get that right.
Right, you did get that right. So again, this is hypothetical, all right? And there may be some other metro districts that have been in place for some time that actually are causing gentrification in the surrounding neighborhoods that are not part of the metro district, okay? In my case, I did this because I've spent so much time in Loretto Heights, I just use this as a hypothetical.
Okay.
That as residents move in here and as the cost of this housing becomes higher and higher, the cost of housing here and here and here could go up.
Okay. So there's a question here. Are there metro districts at Lowry and Stapleton? And I can talk about Lowry since I live there, but there's a lot of other questions. There is one on Lowry that is really a travesty and I think serves as a good warning for everybody on how these things happen. The developer got a piece of contaminated land for $10, went to city council and did a metro district first. And during that time, I mean, there's 3 lobbyists on it and the owner. During that time, what happened is they're organizing city council around, they're lobbying city council around what's going to come later with the plan and with the zoning. They're setting that into place. And of course, it never got further. I mean, it is zoned, but it isn't built because it's contaminated and it can't be touched. So there's a metro district sitting there, and there's another one on Lowry, but I think Stapleton used another financing tool. So I don't see any listed.
Chris, that's a good point because often we see some of this in the media as well as among residents. People will confuse a metro district with a homeowners association. Okay. You know, in the typical, a homeowners association is validly private. We saw a case kind of unrelated, but it's related to a metro district where the metro district was telling someone, they're living in a metro district, I think it was in Whispering Pines, this was in the Denver Post recently, where someone wanted to hang out an LGBTQ plus flag on their property, and the metro district said, you have to take that down. Okay. And the person pushed back and they got the help of the ACLU basically saying this government is restricting my free speech. And even the article that was written about that, this metro district is a government and the First Amendment protects our free speech from government interference. It's a little hazier when it's a private organization, but it's not hazy when it's a government organization. That federal judge just threw that case out and said that that person should be able to hang their flag outside the home. But I brought that case up because people pay fees to their homeowners association, and they also pay fees and higher property taxes to their metro district. Sometimes they have both, and sometimes people conflate those two entities.
Okay, there's about 6 more questions and I'm going to try to group them, but Ian, you have your hand up. I don't know if you really wanted to ask something or interrupt. Ian, you're muted.
Yeah. How to do with that annexation and the boundaries and bringing people in and the voting, but he got to that.
Okay, great. All right, so I'm going to try, I think I'm going to read these, Jim, and maybe we can just pick 1 or 2 since we only have like 5 minutes. They're all really good ones. Why don't we simply outlaw metro districts as happened in California? That's one. What are the profit mechanisms for the developer other than shielding liability and being cozy with contractors? When you suggest residents have a vote, would that include non-propertied residents? are the bonds tax-free? Is reform of that little tiny postage stamp master district proposed in your bill? And outside of metro districts, are there solutions proposed to aid and entice developers to create housing or develop in general? Reform, this is a general housing reform question, I think. Reform needs to occur, but outside of that, what are the expected outcomes of these reforms, especially if the tool becomes less appealing to the developers? These districts need reform, but what are the ripple effects? So that's a ton of questions. You want to pick one and then, or two, and then we can get some in writing from you.
Yes, I'm having trouble remembering all of them.
Oh,
but-
never mind. Steve Harley said withdraw. He's going to research himself. So
Okay.
I guess a good one is the reform of the master district included in the Weissman bill?
That is an excellent question. And the bill has not yet been filed. I've talked to the sponsor informally, but he's asked me to keep the contents of the bill, at least for now, confidential.
Okay.
But I can tell you, this is not based on my conversations with him at all, but I can tell you that is going to take some work to unravel, okay? Because what happens here, just to review, just to go, I know I covered a lot here and it can be overwhelming, but what happens here is the master district controls the taxes and future bond debt of the servant districts within the same residential development, okay? And so that was a result of an intergovernmental agreement. It's a contract between Loretto Heights Metro District number 1 and Loretto Heights Metro District number 2, that one can be the boss, if you will, of number 2, okay? That might be a constitutional issue where it may be difficult to just come in and void that contract.
Okay.
I'm not a lawyer, but and we do have some lawyers in the group that I'm involved in, Coloradans for Metro Reform, who are looking at that. One of the openings there is that when that intergovernmental agreement was executed, and these are lawyers who have been around contracts a lot. This is the first contract that they saw where there are two signers, at least two signers to a contract, right? Well, in the case of these intergovernmental agreements between masters and servants, the same person signs both sides of the contract. So there's some legal opinion that may not be an enforceable contract. So we're exploring litigation on that.
Okay. Yeah, it's 10:32. So I think there's a lot more to discuss, but I think we're going to have to wind up so we can start around the city. And I'll try to get these questions to you, and maybe you can give some more feedback to us.
I'd be happy to take any questions that weren't answered, and I'll write them down and send them to Christine, and you can distribute them to the group.
Okay, I really appreciate you sharing all you've learned since you first encountered this tool. So I really appreciate it. I think we all do. And I'm hoping that maybe our city council, instead of just rubber stamping them the way they always have, I've seen it several times, the Fox Island one, it's years before they need the development. They just get it in place. So I'm hoping that all of us on this call, and then maybe you can also send us the contact information or who, if people, I don't think we can take up the issue of supporting the state initiative at this point, because we would need to have both sides and have a further discussion. And it sounds like it's moving through, but if you want to give people, or you could write in the chat, emails or the bill number or something so people can write to their own legislator.
Oh, I'd be happy to do that. I'd be
Great.
happy to.
Well, thank you, Jim. And now we're going to move to around the city. And we haven't done this in quite a while. For those of you who've been attending for a long time, we just sit around and everybody takes 3 minutes and says, my neighborhood's working on X and my neighborhood's working on Y, and shares something that's going on or something that their R&O is concerned with at this point. So, oh, I see Ian's popped back in.
Christine, before we go to that, I had put
yeah.
on the agenda just an update on the bill at the State House regarding why am I spacing the inclusionary housing? Oh my goodness. I just wanted to give an update really quick. I put it in the notes. That link that is in the invite will take you directly to where you can find all the information yourself. But I just want everyone to know it made it through committee and 3 readings of the House, and so now it's headed to the Senate. It will go to the State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee. It meets on Tuesdays at 1:30 and Thursdays upon adjournment. They do not have a date set yet, but it would be a Thursday or a Tuesday if anyone is interested in tuning in or testifying themselves.
And similarly, if you want to put in the bill number and ask people to write to their state senators, that would be useful. Thank you, Ian. I'm okay. I'm going to go to raised hands and let people share. And this is a little different because we haven't done this on Zoom. So I'm thinking. Let's see if there's no hands. I'm sure people have things to share. Nola, did you want to share anything from Globeville, Elyria, Swansea, from the GES Coalition? I'm putting you on the spot, but, oh, and then you don't have to, just if you want to.
Sure.
Yeah.
I can start off, Christine. And good morning, everyone. My name is Nola Miguel. I'm with the Globeville, Elyria, Swansea Coalition, organizing for health and housing justice, and we are not an RNO. We are a mission-driven nonprofit organization in Globeville, Elyria, Swansea. But we do work with a lot of the RNOs in the neighborhood. And I am the director of the organization, meaning that I am directed by our cooperative leadership within the neighborhoods and asked to move things forward. And just to give an update, as many of you know, or you're hearing, there is tons of development happening in Globeville, Elyria, Swansea right now. So we have probably 5,000 to 10,000 units that are coming in that are in the pipeline right now in the neighborhood, which is about the size of the existing neighborhoods. So what we're talking about is a huge, huge shift right now. Not to mention the I-70 development, which is just a major day-to-day impact in the lives of Swansea and Elyria residents, and then the National Western coming, starting with the CSU buildings are being developed right now on the western side of the campus. And I'm happy to talk about that, maybe the National Western at a different meeting in the future, Christine, because I think we're going to have a bunch of things coming up around that. But just wanted to mention that the coalition is working on, we've developed an equitable development plan, and that will be on our website pretty soon, or at least the foundational narrative around that. And then we'll be updating that ongoing as different pieces of campaigns are coming up. But we are really overwhelmed. I just want to say that there is so much happening in each one of these developments that, I mean, I can just name, so there's, Fox Park that Christine was mentioning in Globeville. There's all the Denargo Market stuff that's happening just, on the other side of the river from Globeville. There's, 4995 Washington is a city-owned site that's going to come up for RFP pretty soon. That's another large development site. They're going through rezoning already for 5 stories there. There's the 40th and Clayton and Swansea property. We're getting rumors about these pre-applications for other properties in Elyria and Swansea. There's the 48th and Race development that has is equitable, is half, 51% affordable, and they're doing some really deep affordability there, but that's a huge development in Elyria. So this is happening all over the place, and we're dealing with quite a bit and trying to figure out ways for community to have more power and more say, because that's really what we struggle with the most is having influence. Being able to make a difference in having some sort of community benefits agreement or some sort of equity component to allow this development. So that's all we have going on. And
that's all.
I do need to time out here pretty soon. I have an appointment at 11, but I just
Okay,
below and offer to after another meeting and talk more. And we're happy to bring a lot of, some of the resident leaders to attend as well and let you know what we're working on in more detail.
well, thank you for being here. Okay, I see Steve Harley from Baker has his hand up.
Hi, folks. Well, the one thing I wanted to share is that the Baker Historic Neighborhood Association is endeavoring to add a zoning overlay to promote more cost-effective and well-designed ADUs in our neighborhood. Our residential zoning allows ADUs, and a lot of people are building them. But since so many of our lots are 25 feet wide, the bulk plane, among other things, really constrains the design. We get a whole bunch of milk box shaped ADUs that also have a very small amount of, relatively small amount of livable space in them for the cost of construction. So our proposal is at the point where we need to get buy-in from our fairly large residential area. We're not just going to cover the historic district, we're going to cover all the URH 2.5 area in Baker, which is it's close to, it's on the order of 600 to 800 properties. And our council person, Jolan Clark, has told us he'll sponsor this if we show him that the neighbors want it, that the neighborhood wants it. And so our challenge is to demonstrate that buy-in. And I'm not that experienced at this particular kind of politics. So that's the interesting little thing we're about to embark on is some kind of a way to prove to our council person that we really want this, because you can understand that he doesn't want to sponsor a zoning overlay that turns out to be unpopular. He wants it to be kind of ready baked, and I understand that. And so far we've publicized it a fair amount. I think people are pretty much looking forward to it, but there's a lot of ifs, ands, and buts. If for instance, the people who are remote property owners feel differently, or if people decide that they don't want potentially somewhat larger ADUs built next to their property or things like that. So anyway, if people have ideas of how to get this buy-in, we have a bunch of ideas already, but we're not experts at this. And so that's one thing that, I have some folks like who've done some rezonings recently that I'm going to ask how they did it too. But that's the big thing happening in Baker.
That's a big job too. It's a big organizing job. So thank you. Let's see. Oh, come on, guys. I don't see any other hands. Somebody wants to raise their hand, I'm sure, and share.
I don't know how to raise my hand, but I do have something to contribute.
Okay, is this Robert?
Yes, this is Robert Schmid from Berkeley Regis United Neighborhoods. And project that our ZAP committee is working on now is a pattern book for future development that will support the active centers and corridors design overlay that is coming up to council, I think, this coming week.
So
this would be a document that would be available to developers that would be coming in and looking at property that was MX or MS within our district, and it would give them a sense of place of what the community is seeing as acceptable design parameters and elements in developing MX and MS properties.
So I haven't seen a pattern book, but I'm assuming you mean you give them what already fits within existing zoning with the overlay without going for any zoning changes, what they can do and what.
Correct. Correct. And it looks at various building elements, windows and openings, of primary street elevation setback, building setback off the primary street property line to allow for enhanced outdoor seating for restaurants. Basically, what it does as an underlying overlay is that it removes the general development classification from MS and MX zoning. So a typical 100% slot home project could not be developed on an MX property, for instance. It would have to be mixed use.
Okay.
I just have a quick question on that. Are you, so I may have missed that. Are you taking that to the Planning and Zoning Commission or the City Council to get that?
It's already been through,
placed?
it's already
Okay.
been through planning board, and it's going to
Cool.
council this week.
Okay, cool. I just didn't know.
Well, the zoning change, the overlay is that Sarah speaking? So the zoning
yes,
change
yeah.
has, not the pattern book. The pattern book is just a tool that doesn't
Right.
go through planning. Okay.
Yeah.
So is there somebody else who wants to chime in? There's a lot of neighborhoods here that I'm not.
I'm not sure how to raise my hand, Chris.
Oh, okay, well, go ahead, Larry.
So we're part of a larger rezoning for ADUs in regard to what Steve was saying. And as we've gotten into learning about what actually is possible under the zoning code with ADUs, we're discovering that there are, just as in the zoning code itself that was done in 2010, this kind of combination of contextual and form-based zoning has resulted in pretty sterile and uncreative building forms. And the ADU section really limits what's possible in terms of what these ADUs are going to look like. Sorry about that. I'll turn that off. And so there needs to be reforms within the zoning code regarding ADUs to actually make possible really nice looking and creative ADUs. One of the reasons, at least in these large rezonings, which includes ADUs, that people are not building them is that the requirements are so onerous and the outcomes are so uninteresting that people are not really taking advantage of building ADUs. I just want to point that out as another flaw in the current zoning code. I know I may ruffle a few feathers here, but I think it's something that needs to be addressed.
Larry, can I interject? I think that's exactly a summary of why we're undertaking our overlay in Baker.
Well, it just needs to be citywide in terms of the parts of the zoning code, the actual ordinance that needs to be reformed. That would be my point of view, is it needs to be done citywide as well.
Okay. Is there somebody else who doesn't know how to raise their hand but would like to chime in, tell us what's going on in their R&O? I can talk, but I want to see if there's other people. So I'll talk about Lowry while everybody's getting something ready. Our R&O is dealing with some complex issues because we continue to have a piecemeal rezonings along a certain area from Chapter 59 into the new code, while we have been waiting 11 years and have been promised for 11 years that we were going to come into the new code. And this is a huge problem on Lowry because, as you know, when we all sat around from 2005 to 2010, looking at our maps and our neighborhoods and the built environment that existed at that time, and saying, well, I think this should be urban edge because we have alleys, and, or this should be, I don't know, downtown for this reason, or this should be suburban because we have driveways in the front, and any number of large discussions that went on. We were excluded from that because we have very complex planned building groups on Lowry, which are very dense. They were actually used because the new code wouldn't allow that density at the time. So they figured out a way to do it. But anyway, we've been waiting 11 years and we continue to see these, what I call piecemeal rezonings going through. And what that does is sets into motion the next piecemeal rezoning, and eventually will help us decide what our new code is like. So we feel like we're being excluded from the process the rest of the city went through, which was to decide our overall context for the new code. So we're working on that, and specifically in one development we're working on, the developer's been very good about coming to the RNO and very transparent and speaking with us. We're also trying to see if we can work with them to get them to voluntarily include more affordable senior housing, which is a very complicated issue. So we have lots going on. So somebody else, Adrian, you want to speak?
I do.
Okay.
I'll even turn on my video. I sort of have a question. At Baker, we are starting to try and address the sidewalk issue. As far as we can tell, nobody at the state or city level has shown any effective movement in that area. And so we are just starting to form a little committee so that Baker can deal with its own sidewalk issues on its own. I was interested in the Metro District discussion today because it sounded like it might be a way to basically develop a mechanism for Baker to do this on their own. And my question is not so much to brag about how forward Baker is, which sometimes we are, sometimes we aren't, but to ask the membership in general whether anyone else has been doing this or is thinking about doing it. For us, it's a huge mobility issue because we have those wonderful old, what are they called? Sandstone pavers on much of our neighborhood. And we also have wonderful trees, and the combination is deadly if you happen to be in a wheelchair or jogging or whatever, because the pavement, the sidewalks are just not flat. I mean, not even close to flat. And it's very expensive to repair them, to replace them. And some people don't like the aesthetic of having concrete or whatever. So we're just going to get into those issues. And I just love for anyone out, and don't, take up time with the group perhaps, but just contact me at Baker. I'll stick my email in the chat. If you've got any contributions, or if you want to be part of the action, if you're anywhere near Baker, and we're probably going to need all the help we can get. But at the end of the day, we're probably going to try and set up a fund that will give us a chance to fix everybody's sidewalk in order of importance, so that the really bad ones can get fixed, because they're sure as hell not going to get fixed by citizens doing the right thing, because mostly we can't afford it.
Before we go to other people, Jim, did you have anything to add on his idea of creating a mini metro district to do sidewalks?
There might be some merit to that. I'd be more than happy to analyze that. Maybe Adrian and I could have more discussion about it. I think that the where I'm coming from is I'm trying to reform some of the abuses of these metro districts. I think the abuses can be really minimized, if not eliminated, when there's already people living there. So because you will be in charge from day one. So that could be a potential tool for you to get to solve your sidewalk issue.
Great. Thank you, James.
I will, I see your email. Is that your email there? We can sit down and talk about that if you'd like.
That'd be great. I'd really appreciate that, James.
Okay.
And is there anyone like Alan Gass or Larry or Joel or people who have been coming to ZAP for years where we have been discussing this larger citywide sidewalk issue? I mean, I can just see the discussions, but I can't remember where that ended up. What happened? Is it just money? Is it neighborhoods that don't want it? Does anyone recall?
The auditor completed a review of the sidewalk repair program that the city started a couple years ago, and it essentially found that it's a failure on every level, and that's not terribly surprising. That was just a kind of a workaround, keeping our existing broken system of hoping individual property owners repair and maintain and install sidewalks, just with some encouragement from the city on a roving basis. So now that that's pretty definitively not worked, I'm optimistic that council leaders like Paul Cashman will be looking at what do we do to take this more seriously and more systemically. And actually, one of the recommendations in the auditor's findings was to take a broader whole scale approach and reconsider some of the fundamental approaches to how we use hope as our method for maintaining sidewalks.
That's great. Okay. Anybody else want to chime in? Neighborhood issues, neighborhood organizing?
I'll jump in. This is Ian Tafoya. I live in Bear Valley. I think the biggest conversation I've seen being had, two concerns. One, the concern about the river, continually about the river. Bear Creek also, there are E. coli issues that have to do with wastewater and stormwater pipes that are old, that are connected to some of these older developments. In particular, I live closer to the Lakewood Denver border, and there are concerns on both sides and pointing fingers, but I know it's a larger issue, and we're feeling the connection when we're talking about having our own city and our state suing each other over stormwater plans and or wastewater plans and how all that's managed. I think it's not a good thing, and ultimately we're all losing out by the water being so terrible. So the other thing that has been under conversation, this is more transportation focused, but it does affect people's housing. On Sheridan Boulevard, it's not the safest place to go north-south on for pedestrian or bicycle. And there are a lot of curb cuts, many for businesses, but also many for housing that are right, their houses are right on Sheridan. And so just, I see conversations happening about that, and people wanting safety, but also homeowners wanting to continue to have access to their homes. So I think what I've seen is a discussion of like, well, maybe we could take some away from the businesses, and the housing sections can be that way because the cars aren't coming out of them as fast or as often, probably. And fast, I didn't mean, I just meant as often.
Okay, I'm seeing a question, sort of a comment from somebody, and I can't remember what HHWP stands for, the neighborhood, but Bruce Basket is saying he doesn't know the names of the people trying to put a ballot initiative on to repeal the group living text amendment, but this might be a future ZAP discussion. ZAP has not had any requests that we bring a discussion of that initiative to the members. Did you want to speak to it, Bruce? I don't know if Bruce wants to speak. If you do, you're on mute. But while I'm waiting to see if you want to speak, the short answer is that hasn't been raised. You know, haven't heard. I haven't heard, and I talked to a lot of people, I haven't heard a groundswell for repealing it. Oh, Alan Gass, do you have your hand up? Thank you, Jane. I didn't see it. Alan, would you like to speak? Okay. All right. Well, I mean, is there anything going on in Platt Park? Is there anything going on in Wash Park? Anything else we need to hear about? Otherwise, we can end early. There's nothing wrong with ending early on a gorgeous Saturday. I'm just going to check for hands once more. Okay, I see no more hands. Does anyone want to yell out something?
Hey, I just want to say thanks everyone for tuning in today. And if you're around Cheeseman Park at all, I'm going to be there tabling for a couple climate justice initiatives. I had a chance to see Margie Valdez last week. She stopped by, so it'd be nice to see people in person if you're walking around.
Great. Okay, everybody, and you have our email, zoningplanning@denverinc.org. Oh, Larry, do you have your hand up? Oh, no, he's just saying okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. Oh, and don't forget, I put this on the, Ian put it on the last notice, but on April 10th, I'm just seeing Jane, so I'm going to remind you, our INC delegate meeting, the larger full meeting, will be on sustainability, and we have a really full agenda, and it could impact all of our committee work in zoning and planning, as well as other parks and other committees. Jane, did you want to add something about it?
Yes, thank you, Christine. I just want everyone to realize that this is sort of the follow-up of the election this last year to create a new sales tax to provide climate action solutions in the city, and that the majority of those funds are to go to the neighborhoods that are the most impacted by climate change. So I think it's going to behoove all of us to make sure that those funds end up, where they were intended. The thing on the 10th, there will nothing against a slide presentation, but we've asked all of our speakers to bring photos and drawings and those kind of things to represent how cities and Denver in particular could look with some of these climate action changes coming into effect. So I invite you to join us on the 10th.
Thank you. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody, for coming.